Where was I? All right, we talked about the Iowa gun situation. Let's move on to the next story. The next story of the day is about
To ISIS.
Iran. So yesterday I covered the explosion in Iran at the Qasem Soleimani memorial at a cemetery in Iran, and there was speculation as to who was responsible for it. There were plenty of, weirdly enough, well, not weirdly enough, but diaspora Iranians that live outside of Iran, that rushed, the monarchist diaspora Iranians, that rushed to claim that it was Iran doing it to itself, a false flag, if you will. It's not really that weird if you are familiar with the politics of Iranians and diaspora and how reactionary they can get. Okay, especially ones that don't have any more remaining family members in Iran. Oh my God, the less family members they have in Iran, the more the more reactionary they are. Iran blamed Israel and the US as well. So that part is not entirely true. Iran did say, I think, something along the lines of potentially it could be the United States of America or Israel, but they said that they were investigating it, at least as far as I understand. Like the Democracy Now! Interview with an Iranian writer, researcher that I was listening to before ISIS took responsibility for the attack was that it was that their first priority was looking into figuring out who it was. Leftists were quick to blame Israel. Some did. An understandable assumption to make. Israel has done, executions and whatnot on Iranian soil. But the major reason as to why this was perhaps not likely to be Israel or the United States of America, especially unless it was like a group that they had funded and facilitated like MEK, would be because there were no high priority targets. Because ultimately, the United States of America and Israel do indiscriminately and regularly kill civilians on foreign soil. But usually they do it while they're simultaneously trying to kill a high priority target. It is still an act of terror, and and it's not because like of some moral reason, but considering that there weren't any high priority targets at this explosion as far as we know of, and it was overwhelmingly simply civilians, that this doesn't have the signature of a Israeli attack, right? I thought ISIS was done, though. ISIS is not done. ISIS-K, Khorasan, as we talked about in Afghanistan, is still in operation. They're very marginal. And, of course, they are another group that still exists, that is very limited in nature. I thought ISIS was done because ISIS-K in and of itself is pretty done. And isn't ISIS working for America? I mean, who knows? But yes, that is one group that is definitely anti-Qasem Soleimani. Iran never accused Israel or the USA, by the way. They just said that they bared an overall responsibility, meaning Iran doesn't believe it was Israel or USA. Yes, something along those lines. Which, by the way, when we talk about ISIS, the United States and Israel do bear a responsibility for ISIS and ISIS operations in the region. That much is absolutely true, especially the United States, but Israel as well. Specifically because why would ISIS want to attack Iran and not America and Israel? That's a great question. Why doesn't ISIS ever attack Israel? ISIS-style groups do operate in neighboring countries, such as Syria, for example. Why is it that they never attack Israel? It's just something to think about. I don't know. Are they unable to? No, my friend. They definitely have the ability to. If they can blow up bombs in Iran, why wouldn't they be able to blow up bombs inside of inside of Israel? If this is true, isn't the ISIS equals Hamas take now non-valid? The ISIS equals Hamas take was always invalid. If anything, it was pure projection, much like many of the things that the Hasbara fools regularly pop off with. ISIS is closer to Israel in its operations and also in its credo, its major mission, than it is close to Hamas as a militant group. Just because they are non-state actors doesn't change that reality. They're both non-state actors, but that doesn't mean that they're closer to one another due to their non-state actor formation. Hamas is a resistance group. They are fundamentalists, certainly, in certain aspects of their existence is fundamentalist, right? But Hamas in and of itself is a resistance group. ISIS on its own, ISIS as an entity, is not a resistance group, but instead a group that is slated to utilize religion and commit acts of terrorism and atrocities and take over as much space as they possibly can and dominate. So, let's continue.
This is claiming responsibility for those twin blasts in southern Iran yesterday that claimed dozens of lives. Word of that comes as the UN Security Council issued a statement condemning the attack. Let's bring in journalist Iris Mackler. She is tracking this unfolding story for us from Jerusalem. Iris, what more can you tell us about this?
ISIS attacking a pretty politically strong Islamic State is weird. This is not an attack against Occident. Seems that they're only seeking for blood without political motivation. You're also wrong. ISIS almost exclusively attacks Islamic states. What do you mean? Also, it's Shia. They attacked a Shia state. It's like their favorite type of people to kill if they can ever get away with it. So no, you're wrong about that as well. Pound for pound, ISIS has attacked less non-Muslim states than they have attacked predominantly Muslim populations. It is ridiculous to claim that ISIS is like first and foremost preoccupied with killing like non-Muslim actors in the region. They do kill non-Muslims, or what they consider to be non-Muslims, which happen to usually be Arabs or other like individuals in the territories that they take over. Kurds, they fight Kurds a lot. They fight Turkish forces. They fight a lot of Shia forces, but that's like the largest battles for them. ISIS is Sunni, not Shia. Calling Shia Muslim Pepega? Really? Shias are not Muslim? What are we doing here? ISIS also kills Yazidis? Yes. What's going on in the chat right now? But anyway, look. This was a Newsweek article that is a good article. I've brought this up before. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon attends a conference in Tel Aviv where he said the words, "I prefer ISIS to Iran on our borders." What did he mean by this? He was talking about a time when al-Nusra had taken over territory in Syria and had actual border control between the Israeli occupied territories in Syria, the Golan Heights, and Syria proper. Israel has also given medical aid to ISIS-style militant groups. Israeli think tank, "Don't destroy ISIS" is a useful tool against Iran, Hezbollah, Syria. I think this was a Salon article from Ben. UN report, Israel in regular contact with Syrian rebels, including ISIS. Members of ISIS and Nusra Front also have been treated in Israeli hospitals. A report submitted to the United Nations Security Council by UN observers in the Golan Heights over the past 18 months. Here, this is what I was talking about. Where they had a field hospital that they operated for, specifically for ISIS militants. Citing the UN report, Haaretz noted that there have been several instances detailed in the report that shows close ties between Syrian armed rebels and the Israeli army. According to the UN report, a person wounded on the 15th of September was taken by armed members of the opposition across the ceasefire line, where he was transferred to a civilian ambulance escorted by an IDF vehicle. The Yarmouk Valley is run by ISIS and left alone by Israel. This is a testament to the complex, cynical, and calculated machinations of actors in this conflict. They have a enemy of my enemy is my friend type attitude towards ISIS. This is what I was talking about when I said Israel is both closer in relations to ISIS, but also in its modus operandi. Israel is closer to ISIS, destroying cultural and religious monuments specifically because you consider them to be barbaric or outside of your interests is what Israel does. Israel also claims to be doing this at the behest of religious conquest. If you listen to their military leadership or even their elected members in the Knesset, right? They regularly invoke Judaism. It's not correct. ISIS does the same. They claim to be the real representatives of Islam. They regularly kill non-believers and commit acts of terrorism upon civilian populations, which they dominate, and occupy areas. ISIS's behavior is closest to imperialism by a non-state actor as you can get. Israel does the same thing. I think you're taking this comparison a bit far. Absolutely not. I've made this comparison before. If we are to look at Hamas and Israel as separate entities and compare them to ISIS, Israel's actions are infinitely closer to ISIS than Hamas's actions are. That's it. Unless you look at Hamas and say, oh no, they are barbaric Arabs who are simply doing indiscriminate violence, not with a direct goal of resisting against an apartheid state. You might not agree with the methods. I certainly don't. October 7th is, in my opinion, an act of terror, as I've mentioned before, time and time again. However, ultimately, the specific goal for Hamas is the end to the occupation. The specific goal for ISIS is to control as much territory as they physically possibly can through very violent means. Israel has a similar goal. Israel also, much like ISIS, is a false bearer of their own respective religions. Israel rides Judaism in the same way that ISIS rides Islam. What was Hamas's plan after October 7th then? This was described many, many, many times over, I think. Hostage release, possible development of a port inside of Gaza. This was very clearly laid out. Given the 1 to 1,000 ratio of prisoner exchanges that has happened in the past, their goal was to take hostages and immediately engage in a hostage negotiation where there would be a mutual exchange of prisoners of war. That was the goal. They very openly revealed their plans. It was not a secret. What does this person say? If ISIS was formed in response to the U.S. occupation of Iraq to resist its destruction of the state and its people, that would be comparable to Hamas. But ISIS is what formed on response to the power vacuum left by the U.S. occupation of Iraq. Anyway. Moving on. Let's continue.
Claim and its significance given the heightened tensions across the Middle East.
And no, the end of the occupation does not mean wiping out and extending the 7th of October to all of Israel. You're absolutely incorrect on that. Just like the end of the apartheid did not mean death and destruction to South Africa, just like the end of the French colonial, French colony of Algeria did not mean that, that French people were wiped out and France was wiped out. Just like the end to the Troubles did not mean that Northern Ireland was wiped out in its entirety. This has not happened throughout history. If anything, the only time when you see genuine wipeouts, I think it's pretty clear the answer is yes, regardless of your answer. Well, then I don't think you're in here for discourse or to change your mind or to see a different perspective. I think you're in here you've made up your mind already, and nothing will be able to change it, it seems. So when I give you historically relevant examples that are identical parallels almost, you're just not going to change your mind. So I don't know if this is productive for you to stay in here and keep chirping away. I mean, you can, but you're just yelling at a wall. I'm willing to be convinced, but assuming the answer is no means ignoring all the facts about Hamas and what they did. I don't think you're willing to be convinced, because I just gave you I gave you multiple historical examples. And unless you think that the Arab mind is somehow barbaric and different than, South African black people that wanted to end the apartheid, or the Irish that wanted to end British colonial occupation, or the Algerian mind, then I don't know what else to tell you. There would be no Hamas without the Israeli occupation and apartheid. It would just simply not exist. That's it. Why don't you link your YouTube without wasting effort repeating? Yes, you can go and watch many of the YouTube videos that I've made on this matter if you would like to learn more.
Least right now.
We heard within the last hour that there was a statement issued by ISIS, by the Islamic State, and it said that it had carried out this attack. It spoke in disparaging terms about the Shia. Just a reminder, Iran is ruled by the Shia Ayatollahs. ISIS, the Islamic State, is a Sunni group. No love lost there, and that's what we have at the moment. Yesterday we were discussing who it might be when there was no claim. Was it internal enemies, Kurds, other groups, Arab groups in the south of the country who are opposed to the Iranian rule? Was it the Islamic State? Was it Israel? So I think in some ways the fact that there's a claim that takes Israel off the table might calm things down, because there's been the attack 2 nights ago by Israel in Lebanon that killed the number 2 of Hamas, Salah al-Aruri. Israel hasn't confirmed that. The fact that there was then this attack in Iran, and then an attack today in Iraq on Shia militias linked to Iran. That really ratcheted up the tension for Tehran. And as you know, when there's tension for Tehran, there's tension for the entire region. So in a counterintuitive way, knowing that this was an attack by Islamic State might actually calm things slightly, because it takes away that uncertainty and it takes Israel out of that picture.
Yeah. So ultimately, even if, I mean, I think it's likely that this is correct, that this is a ISIS-K operation, I guess. I thought that their capabilities were significantly more limited than being able to do such a thing. But it certainly could be a opportunist act. By ISIS-K, rather than this being directly an American or even an Israeli attack. It also is always more likely than this just being like an Iranian self-imposed false flag, which is what some people were bringing up because Qasem Soleimani's family members were not there attending the memorial, which is what they said was reason alone for this to be an Iranian explosion on its own. I don't believe Iran needs a false flag attack for a justification to attack Israel or anyone else for that matter, because they recognize the popularity of their proxy groups or groups that are funded and armed by Iran in the region. They already have enough. They already have a mandate if they were to go and attack Israel right now. This was the expectation from the regional, the population of the region. This was what they thought was going to happen already after October 7th. Given their known collaboration with Israel, is it reasonable to suspect that ISIS could have been assisted in this by Israel, just as some other groups have assisted in acts by the CIA? Maybe. Could be. Ultimately, you have to look at who stands to gain. Yeah, ISIS-K is the one in Afghanistan, chatters. Ultimately, you look at who stands to gain the most. But this is pure speculation. Yes, Ima Bear is right. This is pure speculation. The timing of the attack and the victims of the attack are very different than Israel's signature, though. Israel has conducted operations and has conducted assassinations both on Iranian soil and of Iranian nationals in the region. They've killed nuclear scientists. They've killed top-ranking military officials. Israel, however, seemingly is trying to expand the war a little bit, or basically looking at how the regional actors will react, like the regional adversaries will react to them expanding on the conflict. This much is a certainty, in Lebanon at least. Attacking Beirut is certainly an escalation. I've seen people say ISIS never attacks Israel, try to imply ISIS are Mossad lackeys. I mean, it is true. ISIS does not attack Israel, as far as I know. And yes, Israel has worked with ISIS in the past. So that part is not incorrect. Specifically in Syria. How has/will Lebanon respond to the Beirut incident? So, overall, ISIS has claimed a small number of attacks against Israel over the years, and earlier today, ISIS's Al Furqan media released an audio statement calling on people to attack Jews and Israelis wherever they find them as a response to the Gazan war. ISIS's Al Furqan Media. Yeah, they're, like I said, ISIS's actions or ISIS's death toll is predominantly Muslims. Muslims that they consider to be not Muslim enough, or their kind of Muslim, and Arabs in general. That part is true. The United States is also, by proxy of Turkey, by using Turkey and even directly facilitating exfiltrations, has worked with ISIS as well. Like in where was it when they shipped ISIS militants and their family members outside of an area before taking it over entirely. But they've also certainly given, is it Afrin? I think it was. America works with everybody. Are ISIS Muslim? I mean, they consider themselves to be Muslim, and they consider what they're doing to be at the behest of Islam and their understanding of Islam, but they're not. Yeah, this was the Haaretz report. Israel supported rebel groups to push Iranian-backed forces and ISIS fighters away from the Israeli border, foreign policy reports. ISIS is like the evangelicals of Islam. Yeah, no Muslim will claim ISIS, for the record, just so you understand. Like, that's not a real... They're not real Muslims. They just use Islam as to claim what they're doing is to represent true Islam, but it's not correct at all. Anyway. Look good in a suit even if you're wearing shorts under the table. I'm not wearing shorts under the table. Anyway. That's it on the update for Iran. The scarf that I was wearing is the same cardigan that I was wearing yesterday. It's from Nivour, Nivour. It is Yasuo's brand. Yasuo the streamer. Is the Sunni Shia divide an actual big deal among everyday Muslims? Yes. For the record, the ISIS responsibility for attacks on Israel or Jewish people is in dispute. But it doesn't really matter because ISIS does ISIS will regularly do a call to arms to attack members in the Western world, like Jews, Christians, anyone they can in the Western world regularly to try to... Oh, it's Nivour, not Nivour. Nivour? Oh, my bad. Just FYI, ISIS has claimed attacks against Israel, just not large-scale attacks. Yes, it's minuscule in comparison to... It's more so like a call to arms rather than like massive direct attacks. ISIS's victims are predominantly Muslim. So, yeah. The Sunni-Shia divide is only significant in the realm of geopolitics. I mean, it's not like... I don't know. It's not... It's definitely an important divide. But it's not like, random Sunnis are like trying to kill random Shias or anything. I mean, I would say it's not dissimilar to like Protestant Catholic divisions in Ireland, but not necessarily, because the Protestants are supposed to be like operating at the behest of a colonial power, whereas like the Sunni Shia divide is not the same. They're just like different. I don't know. I don't know how to give you like a good... I don't know how to give you an exact comparison. Not going to be an exact comparison. ISIS and Salafists are not Muslims. They are Munafiqs and Zionists. In areas where Sunnis and Shias live side by side, it's a much bigger issue. That's it. Can you explain what you mean by ISIS isn't actually Muslim? I'm not calling bullshit. I genuinely don't know. I mean, they ride for Islam. They claim they're Muslim, but they're not actually Muslim. Like, they're not following the Islamic doctrine at all. It's just they think it's like looking at one of the edge cults, like the Westboro Baptist Church, and be like, that's true Christianity. Okay? Because it's not true. It's all a matter of interpretation to begin with, but it's like they are way above and beyond even the American evangelicals. Okay? But that's it.
The latest on the
if American evangelicals actually acted out on their desires, their blood and soil conquest, in an area where there is, like the material conditions are as volatile and as awful as like the Middle East, instead of going to Applebee's and drowning themselves in margs and $5 margs and jalapeno poppers. Does that make sense? Because like, when you're living in the imperial core, your most extremist religious nut jobs are not going to act out on their desires because there is not enough economic instability. Does that make sense? When you say no other Muslims will support ISIS, does that include all other Shia groups? ISIS is not a Shia group. They're Sunni. Like, obviously not all of them, but won't at least some of them support ISIS? No. Nobody supports ISIS other than ISIS members. Okay? People who are a part of ISIS. And ISIS is not Shia. And no, it is different than Hezbollah or other Shia groups in the region who actually do govern over an area. ISIS's governance over an area is not exactly real governance. It's like having a roving gang take over your village. No Sunni Muslim will turn around and go, ISIS is good. They won't say it. Why? Because ISIS kills a shit ton of Muslims. It's like they do less than the Mexican cartels. No, like at least cartels like sometimes, pay it forward a little bit, or they have like some level of governance duties. ISIS doesn't do that at all. There is no real governance. They're just like, they're militants. It was essentially a government in 2014, 2018, but the territorial caliphate thankfully came to an end. Yeah, but that governance wasn't like real governance. Real governance means civic duties, like responsibilities of the civilian population. Does that make sense? Like if I were to compare it to Pablo Escobar, for example, like he did a lot. He built, communal, he built like, I mean, he was very violent, certainly, but he built like a sense of community and recognized the shared interests of the people that he ruled over, or a territory that he ruled over. And I would say the same for many of the, for some of the other cartels in Mexico, for example. Whereas ISIS's governance was not about like, food programs or anything. Like there was no care or consideration for the civilian population that they dominated. I would not make that comparison to, they had courts, bin men, police forces, and road maintenance teams. Yeah, they had a healthcare service too. But it wasn't necessarily like it was more so policing and not real, and not real like responsibility to their own people even. Chatter, Hassan's not defending the cartel, he's explaining the difference. Like, you guys not remember we did the ISIS healthcare thing where they like stole the British NHS logo? The Islamic State Health Service. Here. The ISHS. Islamic State appears to have released a promotional video for its own health service featuring NHS-style branding and an Australian doctor. Romanticizing narcos? I'm not romanticizing them at all. We're making comparisons between like bad and worse, if that makes sense. Worse being worse than bad. Like 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour is bad, is worse than the 1-minute ad break in the middle of the hour. 3-minute ad break at 20 minutes into the top of the hour is bad. We're doing lesser evil analysis. Yeah. They kill us on a daily basis. Why would we like them? It's like telling Palestinians to like Israel. Yeah. Anyway, the 3-minute ad break is upon us, and you can avoid those ads. The cartels provide community support as an indication of failed governance rather than an indication that cartels are good. I can't think of a group that is like as universally despised by the people. Like even the Taliban are not as universally despised as ISIS is by the people that they rule over. And the Taliban is despised. Does that make sense? This does not mean the Taliban is good. And I'm certainly not saying that. Right? But there is like ISIS's occupation is akin to a colonial one. Like the only historic examples I can use, are basically akin to like, a French colony or a British colony or something, because they operate in a similar structure. Sure, they build like a police force, but so did the British in India, right? Here's the 3-minute ad break now, by the way. Now, of course, there aren't the power that ISIS holds is marginal now, like much smaller. ISIS operates like Republicans wished America operated? Yeah, sure. Exactly. Like, Hamas has some semblance of, support amongst the Palestinian population, albeit its inception, it was marginal support. And throughout the years, that support has increased due to Israel's actions. ISIS, on the other hand, has never had popular support or any kind of support whatsoever from a civilian population. The only people that support ISIS are motherfuckers who are in ISIS. Okay? If anything, this is going to be a controversial opinion. In the Islamic world, I don't know if I should even say this. Never mind. LARPers in the Western world, okay? Salafist LARPers in the Western world are probably larger in size, albeit still incredibly marginal, than the Muslim world, is what I mean. Okay? So if you ever see someone who's like, who acts like, I guess ISIS is doing an honest or just thing, then you're most likely encountering someone who is a LARPer in the West. That's why they unironically will recruit from the West more than they do from the areas that they're operating in. 100%.